If they can't take on a next client with that same smile they did from the first client, what are we doing here? If they can't go and get a meal because they're taking 3 different calls and they're figuring out how to staff these 24/7 cases that are urgent and the call-offs are last minute, what are we doing here? And so these are the sort of things that I feel deeply for these folks, because it's not their fault. It's not like they decided to hire this caregiver who was going to flake on them. And sometimes it's not even the caregiver's fault. There are real emergencies. We get these situations all the time where it's like, oh my God, this person is really going through it.
You're listening to Home Care Hindsight, the podcast where we talk with home care leaders about the big mistakes they've made and the even bigger lessons they've learned along the way. I'm David Knack, head of sales here at Zingage, and I've built a career on the idea that we learn a whole lot more from our mistakes than from our successes, which is great because I've made a lot of mistakes. I've gotten to know some of the leaders in this industry who've built amazing businesses and are super well respected. So I thought it'd be fun, instead of asking them about the great things they've accomplished, to have them tell the story of one of the biggest mistakes that they've made and how that mistake changed their thinking and the way they run their business. All right, welcome back to another episode of Home Care Hindsight, brought to you by Zingage. We are really excited to be at HCAOA today when this podcast releases, talking to people about Zingage Operator and the way our AI agents for care coordination, plus the human team that fills in the gaps, is making a big difference in home care agencies. I am joined today by somebody who probably honestly should have joined the podcast a long time ago. It's Victor Hunt, my CEO and one of the co-founders here at Zingage. Victor, welcome to the show.
Thanks, David. So great to be here finally. I've been on the wait list and glad to finally get off of that.
Yeah, I had to make sure that you proved yourself as a valuable guest on this show before I was going to, stoop to this level. But here we are. So for people who don't know you, how would you introduce yourself?
The most passionate person to step into the home care technology world. I am someone who lives for the home care owners. We are building Zingage to solve for back office operations. Founded Zingage 2.5 years ago. And together with the team, we're focused on making home care as delightful as it can be.
Very good. One of the things, Victor, if you're listening and you're like, the most passionate person in home care technology, you'll notice, Victor, you did not say in home care generally, because every owner we meet has, just a really remarkable story and is doing stuff that is really hard work that you need a lot of chutzpah to continue to do every day. But just one of the stories that sticks out to me is I remember one of our sales guys, Johnny, came to me and he said, hey, how quickly do we think we could get this guy up and running? And he's in New Jersey. And I was like, well, let me ask. And so I sent you the message I'm sure every CEO loves to get, which is like, hey, can you jump on this call? No explanation. And so you jumped on and I was like, hey, how quick can we get him? And I think, were you still at the airport or were you picking up your bag? Where were you in transit when you got that message?
So I just gotten back from a 3-day trip, 3 different cities. It was, I think Kansas City was leg 2, Salt Lake City was leg 3, and then just got off the train into Brooklyn, was going to change clothes and go into the office, and I get the call. So I got out the shower. I'm like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah. And I wasn't quitting, so congrats. But, we had a home care agency owner who had just lost his whole administrative team and was going to have to start from scratch. And it was an amazing opportunity to bring in home care operator, stabilize and formalize the SOPs that his team was going to operate on, and give him the kind of pressure release valve he needed to be able to continue to grow the business instead of have to drop everything and get into the schedule and get into the operations of the thing. So anyways, that's just when we talk internally about the kind of culture that we have here at Zingage, those are the kinds of touchstones that I always think of. I'm going to ask you a question that I probably should have asked you a while ago. Is it cool with you if I start a podcast?
Yeah, when you brought that up, I said, David, you've got so much going on. You've got a full calendar. Everybody already wants to talk with you. What are you going to do? Just put the sales calls on YouTube? And it made sense in the moment. Obviously, it's become phenomenal. But now the fear is, does Zingage just become a podcast? And I know you've got some super fans that already think we are.
Super fans, I think, may be a clinical term that they need to add to the next iteration of the DSM-5, the DSM-6, I suppose. But yeah, it's been fun to do, and I appreciate you guys having a lot of support for something that, honestly, can we tie this to revenue? I'm not sure. I know why I do the podcast, because it's fun and it's interesting and it's a great way to kind of share some good stories about home care. But tell me from your perspective, how this fits in strategically to the way you think about building a company within home care.
Yeah, it goes back to that statement about the passion in home care. These are amazing, really wonderful people. The people we meet and that we get to work with, it's a privilege because they came into this space with a real passion to do something different. A lot of times you hear these stories, it's something very personal for them, either a parent, a child, relative who needed care, and that's what got them started. And then these people, they have such a maniacal focus on doing great work. The problem is there isn't really a lot of focus on this part of the world, this part of healthcare, and yet you see the numbers, so much of what's growing in the economy, the number one fastest growing job categories are in healthcare, but specifically within home care. You can't get enough caregivers. This is the only service in healthcare that people actively want. Nobody says, hey, I'm wanting to go to the hospital or I'm wanting to go to the clinic. They want to be in home and receive great care. And these are the people who are bringing it to them. And so the podcast, it's so important because we want these people to have an outlet to share their ideas and their stories. This isn't about Zingage. This isn't about our technology. It's about how can we take the message that we're hearing from them in these close personal calls and share that with the rest of the world so that it's that much easier to operate. You've got other people who are thinking the same things, who are trying the same type of strategies and learning, because frankly, you've got all these really smart people who have tried things. Some of them will work for their businesses, not for everyone, but there's a home care owner out there who listens to this podcast, says, hey, I'm going to try that. And as a result, someone gets better care, more care. And it's just a fuel for the industry.
I have a loaded question because we've already had some of the industry luminaries on, like a Bob Roth, like a Stephen Tweed. But I'm curious if there's a dream guest that you'd want to have on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to have some more people on the policy angle. I think whoever's operating in CMS and making the decisions around Medicaid reimbursements, around veteran affairs, and those sort of policymakers who are looking at the data from this really high level and saying, here's how much we're going to invest in home care. Because our belief is that care is best received when it's least needed, so to speak, the preemptive care that happens in the home. And we need those people to talk about their thinking around how do we make this really incredible part of the care spectrum more supported? How do we, as home care professionals, do more to show the narrative that's going to make sense to those folks who are making those decisions? That's one angle. The other angle is obviously private insurers and understanding how they're also thinking about reimbursements. Because at the end of the day, this is a space that is obviously needed, but it's so competitive when it comes to which parts of the care spectrum get those reimbursement dollars.
Well, Victor, you're here, and everybody I talk to, I'm like, I feel old, dumb, and just washed here because you and Daniel both are blue chip schools and have these amazing resumes. And this is your second company. You've already successfully founded and sold one company. And so obviously, like, you're somebody who's accomplished a lot, but I don't bring people on this show to talk about the things that went well. Instead, I bring accomplished business leaders on this show to talk about the big mistake that they made in their career and how that mistake changed the way they think about life and about business. So Victor, what's your big mistake?
I think the big mistake is always going to go back to culture and people. Sometimes in building a business, and this is true for everyone, you have these trade-offs that you have to make where you're looking at assembling a team. You're trying to bring together people who are really skilled and talented, who are really passionate and hardworking in their particular craft. But you've really got to zoom out and ask the question of how does this team fit together? How do these people work well together as a unit? Because we're not building, kind of Frankenstein's monster of a bunch of different appendages that all look nice independently, but don't really do well together. And looking back at, my career, I think in my first company, this was certainly the case where we had just hired a ton of engineers from places we had no idea, the quality, the culture fit, and all these different things just to kind of ship code, get things out. And this was something where it was a real estate technology company. So at that time, you're building for property managers and folks trying to get more contractors to fix things. And it's a much different kind of atmosphere than in healthcare. You can't do that kind of stuff in healthcare. You can't make those shortcuts. And that's why our first product really focused on that element of culture. Is when you look at every organization, at the end of the day, the ones that succeed, that retain their talent, that make their talent happy to be there, most productive, it's the ones who focus on culture. I'm reading a book right now. It's called, What You Do Is Who You Are by Ben Horowitz, and famous VC. But the whole theme behind it is how do organizations build a culture that isn't just kind of talk for fodder and just labels for kind of the aesthetics, but instead, how do you take action that brings a team together? So whether it's our little kumbayas whenever we have conferences and bring our folks together, whether it's our offsites, whether it's our improv sessions and those sort of things, it's all about asking the question of what does this team look like as a whole, as a composite? And what do we say no to? There are going to be great people who we turn away, and this happens all the time, simply because we're getting the sense that this individual is a mercenary. They're not really here for the mission. They're here for maybe a 1 or 2 year payout. And that's not what we're about here. We're about the infinite game. We're about the long-term vision. because our people, the customers that we serve, the partners we work with are the same. They're here for a generational impact. And a lot of people, I think, get fixated on kind of the monetary element to that. How do we compensate people the right way? And I think you can't spare compensation. Now, maybe I'll regret saying this to you, but you can't spare compensation on great talent. These people are worth every dollar.
Yeah, I want to make it really clear. My podcasting software makes it easy for me to clip particular things and use them later, like, for example, to promote the show on LinkedIn, or if I needed, like, during salary negotiations later, to be able to, like, share, I don't know, the CEO's own words to encourage him to make some different decisions. But, thanks for saying that. So we've got, like, just to kind of pull the curtain back, like, we've got some unbelievably talented people on the technical side of things. We've got engineers from Uber and from other, like, really successful publicly traded technology companies who've made the leap to what's still a very small, kind of scrappy early stage startup, but that, has really significant resonance with the market that we're in. And, like, obviously we've said no to people who have amazing resumes too. And so what's the things that you're looking for when you're hiring salespeople? When you're hiring product people, customer success people, engineers, financing, or marketing, all of those different kinds of roles, like, beyond the technical skills, can they do it? Can they learn? What are the other kinds of things that being in home care specifically makes a requirement for working at Zingage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are really only two traits that matter here. Number one is, do you care? Is this something that when you wake up every day, you're going to be proud to work on? And for everyone, that looks like something different. We have engineers on the team, like you said, who have done incredible work in their career. These folks are post-economic. They could retire right now and go live on a beach for the rest of their lives. These folks are here because they have touched the care spectrum one way or another. Some family member is receiving care. That person says, hey, this system is not working, no matter how much energy I put into it. I need to be directly in the system that is addressing the root cause problem. The other side of that is the people who are looking forward, who say, hey, I've moved to these big cities. I've moved to San Francisco. I've moved to New York. What happens to my family back on the home front? Who's taking care of those people? Am I going to move them into my tiny little studio to take care of grandma? I don't think so. You've got this huge growing population of folks who need help. And on top of that, the vision around what this future can be. Right now, home care is all about taking care of those who need care most, but this is really a space that should be addressing all of the care continuum for all people, whether it's just getting your annual checkup or getting luxury IV fluids after a hangover over the weekend. That's what people need to see as the vision and really feel invested in. The second one is the desire to win. This isn't a matter of, hey, I'm just going to do my best and see what comes of that. We're here to win because the people on the other side of this product, of this movement, need that care. Their lives depend on it. And you have to wake up every single day saying, these are the trade-offs I'm going to make to move faster. These are the trade-offs I'm going to make to ship better quality. And these are the trade-offs I'm going to make to go and reach those people who desperately need this. And that desire to win is what ultimately permeates through all of our customers. You see how much they care about doing their great work, but then you also see how invested they are in making sure every single client, every single caregiver is taken care of, so that when they show up every single day to the next referral partner, to the next caregiver, they know that they're doing this to make a difference and not just kind of throw any old person into the home.
Yeah. This reminds me of one of our customers. He's been on the show, just generally really good guy, John Bennett, and was chatting with him. And he's a former college football player, coach, and now is in the home care business. And the thing that really stands out to me about him is he says, when we think about winning, it is, do we believe that every person deserves the best care? Well, if you don't, you shouldn't be here. Do we believe that we provide the best care? Well, if you don't, you shouldn't be here. And so he's also a former math teacher. Transitive property, if we think everybody deserves the best care, and if we believe that we provide the best care, then we have to believe that every single person deserves to be cared for by our agency. And I think, when I think about kind of the competitive landscape within home care, this is not so much we've got competitors that we want to beat for the sake of being the best. It is, we believe that what we're doing in home care is unique, is different, and everybody should be using us because it's the absolute best way to run your business is with the tools that we've brought to bear. The first product is Zingage Perform with caregiver engagement and impacting turnover and some of the administrative burden around tasks getting done within the scheduling platforms, but even more so with Zingage Operator, to where we're seeing folks who are literally going on paternity leave as solopreneurs in a startup home care agency. because of the support that our AI and our people are giving. And so it's been really exciting to see. And at least from my perspective, that is when we want to win, it's because what we're delivering for the customers is something completely different from what they're getting anywhere else.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I would take that even further to say that the best providers look at it this way. They believe that if they're not using the best tools, then they are creating a liability, not just for their business and their success, but also for the people on the other end who are supposed to be receiving the best and greatest care. That means to say every minute that someone is spending doing something that a better tool can do for them that doesn't actually make a difference in terms of the quality of care, other than the fact that we check that box, those folks do not find value in actually spending time checking those boxes. And so when we look at the kinds of things that we automate versus the kinds of things that providers should still own and their administrators should still own, we frame it in this way. Does this action make a difference in the quality and quantity of care that we're able to deliver? And if it doesn't, then it is a liability for any human being to be spending time on that. And a good example of this is, if someone has information that they picked up on from a phone call, writing that down and then logging it into a system that it belongs in because of compliance reasons and other reasons that are irrespective of the fact of whether or not they should be doing it. These folks have to understand doing that work takes them away from the next phone call, the next in-person visit, the next hug that they should be giving to their employer, to their clients who need that connection from them.
Okay, I want to transition now to asking you about something that in the industry you think of as underrated, or on the other hand, that you think of as totally overrated.
Yeah, sure. So I think the underrated aspect of this is that this is an industry that is extremely humane. This is an industry where the leaders, if you look at any of these home care providers, deeply understand every aspect of the care continuum. And I think that we have underrated the fact that these folks have really deep expertise in how to completely change the healthcare outcome of a client's patients. And I'm going to get very specific here in terms of, you look at someone who started their business, let's say 20 years ago, because their parent wasn't getting great care. This person started out because their mother fell, broke her hip, ended up in the hospital. Thank God she survived. Now she's getting home care to make sure that she doesn't fall again. This individual now decides they want to start a home care business, and they start very small. What ends up happening is that these people develop such great understanding and strategies, and I think they underrate themselves in terms of what they've learned along the way in building this up, because then it starts to compound. They've gone from this mom and pop to now they've got a full back office staff. They've got hundreds of clients. They've got hundreds of caregivers, and they're wondering, how do I do this? How do I keep growing this? How do I not even just keep growing this, but make it work without having to get up in those late nights? And I think that when we look at some of the conversations you've had on this podcast, a lot of the conversations we've had with our customers, these people are so surprised at, they're asking questions of, how does someone else do this? And we're telling them, actually, you're doing it the best as we're seeing it. And part of that is people, I think, look for this playbook that is evergreen, but that's not quite the reality here. What worked for one person is going to be completely different for another organization. Part of that is your locale is going to be unique in terms of the clients you serve, the size of business you have, the culture you have, the regulations you face. And so all of that is to say it's deeply underrated how smart these people are, how much they already know. And the problem is that this is such an important and overwhelming industry that it can feel like what you know is not enough because it's still demanding so much more. And that's going back again to the point of, why do we need the kind of technology that we're building? It's to get people out of the weeds so that they're not on that same hamster wheel of doing the same things and feeling like it's not working, because you've figured out the right strategies ultimately. The problem is, who has the bandwidth to stay consistent with it and to evolve those strategies as your team grows? And this is why what we do is so important. Going back again to the podcast, the importance of the podcast here is that those strategies will evolve. And what you need to make those strategies evolve most effectively so that you're not going down these dead ends is hear from the other people who have made similar decisions, who have made mistakes, and start to think about how those things can apply to your business, but not so much just complete mimicry, but rather have an intentional approach to trying things out and putting it on autopilot when it does work, evolving it when it needs to change. And so I, again, reiterate that these people are so smart. They've done so much work. They're overwhelmed with the burden of keeping the ship running that they don't get to appreciate how much of what they know actually does work, because so much of it is this juggling act.
I think a lot about like the cognitive load and the kind of cognitive bandwidth that our people are under, because they have figured out very specific solutions to the problems that show up in their business. And like you said, so much of this depends on the geography and the size of the territory that they're in. And, like how rural is it? How urban is it? What's the payer mix? What are the kinds of backgrounds that your caregivers are from? What are the kinds of backgrounds that your clients are from? And what does that mean about expectations all around? And they have just by osmosis understood so much of that, but you can only make so many decisions in a day before the quality of your decision begins to degrade. And so I think that's the rub, is this kind of, these business owners and their teams know what needs to be done, but it's having the bandwidth and the executive function to be able to do it day in and day out. And so the question is, how do we create, this is a word that you use a lot and that I've kind of think about a lot as I approach my own role, is this idea of synthetic capacity. How do we clone our best people? How do we extend the operations of our team, but without adding a ton of headcount? I think about one of our customers, Amy Peterson Smith, Senior Helpers owner in South Carolina, and she said, I want to grow by 20% year over year, and I don't want to hire any more administrative staff. And I love that goal, because we know that bill rates can only increase so much in a private pay context before people get into the gray market and start hiring private caregivers. We also know that we're going to have to continue to pay caregivers more as cost of living increases. And we've got to remain competitive on the staffing front. And so it's either we get leaner on the back end or our margins suffer. And I don't want anybody's margins to suffer. And so that's the thing that I think has been so exciting about working with agencies, is finding ways to extend the capacity of their best people rather than having to bring in more people, the cultural challenges around change management, the risk of hiring B players instead of A players. And so I think really leaning into, we've got the team that we need. We just need to figure out how to provide the leverage they need to do their best work and to do it at scale, is the kind of thing that keeps me up at night and that I know we get out of bed to do every day.
Yeah, 100%. And something I'll add to that is that the way we do this, the way we create that synthetic capacity, is to look at this holistically and ask, in my back office today, I have a staff that is composed of some absolute killer people. These are people who we describe as Swiss Army knives, who are doing the role of 3 to 5 different people in one, and they're making trade-offs all the time. And so the question is not, how do I clone this person, but how do I take that part of their function, of the work that they do, and get the tedious parts off of their plate so that they can actually focus on the things that they're really good at, that they're really energized by. And the story that always stands out to me is, John Bennett's team, who they started out, all of these folks who were doing the on-call work. And this is a lot of tedious work when it comes to chasing people down to clock in, chasing people down to fill out timesheets and staying compliant. Once all of that kind of skunk work went away, the reality was that these people started looking for new work, and in the most energizing places. They started doing more house visits, more trainings, more engaging acts that grew the business and continued to energize their best people. And so now you're seeing the synthetic capacity is not so much that we're taking away whole swaths of the job, but rather taking away the most tedious and painful parts so that people can expand the parts that they really love and that do drive the business forward, move the needle significantly.
One of the things, and I know there's a lot of businesses that have made this like a standard practice, but one of the biggest opportunities to impact everybody in your organization is the first time a caregiver and a client meet, and how your administrative team, how your care coordinators can be involved in that. But that's one of the easiest things when you are under the gun and you're filling call outs and you're chasing clock ins and you've got to do payroll, all the chores of the business. That is one of the easiest things to fall by the wayside, because you've got to get in the car and you've got to make time to be there at the right time and you've got to do the introduction. And it's one of those touches that the cumulative impact of not having done that, you can just start to see the degrading of trust between your clients and your caregivers and your staff. And so that's a moment that only people can do. I think a lot about all the stuff that AI can't do today, that AI shouldn't do ever. And that in particular, that person-to-person introduction, creation of trust is the kind of thing that we want people doing, because it makes a huge difference. But all of the chores that exist, tracking down EVV compliance, getting billing situated because you had to go fix clock ins and clock outs, all of that takes away the ability to have those serendipitous, magical moments in home care.
Yeah, 100%. The analogy I think of here is we look at home care as this somewhat more efficient way of putting healthcare in the home. What makes that really special is if you can start to think about how efficiency layered with the human touch really creates that dynamite experience. An example is if you had your local pizzeria, you order, a slice and it gets to your home on time, but the person who delivers it isn't just some out of school summer camp kid, but instead it's the owner of the pizzeria who comes and shakes your hand, right? And so we want to create more of those opportunities. And the way we do that is by freeing up those people who started these businesses, free up their best people who they hired because those people are amazing with the kind of care they deliver, and put those people in position to have many more of those encounters.
I'm going to accuse you of some very New York analogy there of the owner of the pizzeria comes to your house. Like, what's next? The guy who makes the bagels is going to show up and hand deliver it to you, Victor?
Hey, listen, I know Papa John's, he's canceled right now, but I wouldn't mind a handshake with whoever's founded Domino's.
Yeah. All right. I want to move now. We talked about a big mistake that you've made. I think it's funny, actually, as an aside, that some of the biggest challenges that our customers consistently face, making mistakes on hires. It's a huge challenge for everybody. That about, making sure that we're focusing on the stuff that is in our zone of genius and not being pulled in a million different directions. Like all the challenges that they experience are things that we're trying to solve for on a daily basis. I don't think we've totally cracked it yet, but it just makes me feel good that some of the same problems that our customers experience are the ones we were having. Anyways, we talked about a big mistake you made. What's a little mistake that you see home care owners make all the time? And if they quit, it'd make their lives or their businesses like 10 times better.
A lot of home care owners, and we joke about the kind of maniacal schedulers who are just absolutely dialed in. It's the same for the best home care owners. They're super dialed into the business. They're looking at every single detail. And that's very important. And there's kind of this give and take in terms of you want to have that extreme focus and that extreme connection to the business. But I think that a lot of people are, again, looking at some of the details that don't actually move the needle. For instance, the way that we use some of our tools, or whether we use a tool for problem X or go with, just our traditional ways of staffing. These are the sort of things that I think people need to zoom out and ask the big question, which is my why. Why did I get into this space in the begin with? Did I get into this because I wanted to spend a ton of time on keeping track of my system of records? Did I want to spend a ton of time on the phones? Or did I want to do this because I wanted to provide really great quality care to wonderful people? And so the whole idea is that if you can get people to, you can zoom out, I think that resets the paradigm here and gets them to, look at solutions that are going to offload that work at a level that they are comfortable, not just comfortable with, but delighted by. And then secondly, refocus that energy because it's never going away. They're never going to not be that dialed in. How are we going to refocus them to spend more time on the exact way that, that caregiver and client connection is made up front? How are we going to get them to kind of reinvest their time in the quality of a client intake procedure or the work that they're doing to build relationships with those referral partners? And so I really want to, reshape the narrative away from this, kind of chill out mentality to instead, where do we deploy this fantastic energy, this passion that we all have to the most impactful things without losing track of the things that do matter? Because it still does matter that we take care of those, the tedious things, but let's do that in a smart way.
All right. I want to do something which is some kind of rapid fire of like, we talk a lot about the kind of outcomes that we want to deliver for our home care owners and their teams. This is, I'll kind of kick it off and then we can just kind of kick it back and forth for a few minutes. And if it's horrible, we can cut this out, but I think it'll be good. One of my things I think about a lot is there's a team in California that we work with that wants to be able to, like, previously they'd send a text. Whoever was on call would send a text to the team and say, hey, I'm going to go do a 1 hour workout class. Can somebody else watch the phones? And my goal is that everybody can go do a workout class whenever they want.
I think that's right. People have to get back to the mentality of you've got to put on your oxygen mask first. If your whole team is burnt out, if they can't take on a next client with that same smile they did from the first client, what are we doing here? If they can't go and get a meal because they're taking 3 different calls and they're figuring out how to staff these 24/7 cases that are urgent and the call-offs are last minute, what are we doing here? And so these are the sort of things that I feel deeply for these folks because it's not their fault. It's not like they decided to hire this caregiver who was going to flake on them. And sometimes it's not even the caregiver's fault. There are real emergencies. We get these situations all the time where it's like, oh my God, this person is really going through it. And it's a whole domino effect that just completely wrecks everyone's day and some people's lives. And so the question then is, what are we going for? Are we going for, care that is impermanent, care that's going to get us to next week? Or are we going for a system that is going to work for generations? And why I say generations is because this problem isn't going away. You can automate all the things you want, but people will always need healthcare. People will always need that connection. And so we need real systems that are going to take care of every touch point. And what I really love about, the way we started the business wasn't so directed on the provider to client or patient element, but really the provider to the employee, the caregiver and clinician. Because if we don't have that strong bridge, that strong connection as an organization, providers, vendors, all of the partners in this space, then how are we going to survive in the onslaught of demand from new patients and new clients? We need that sort of resilience. And so starting from the framework of what's my why? I'm here for care. And that doesn't stop, with just my clients and patients. It extends to my whole team. And that means I have to look out for those people who are not getting enough rest, for those people who need better health themselves, because we don't even have enough caregivers to staff the clients we have. How are we going to, staff the people who are calling out because they're so sick?
We've talked about a lot of mistakes that were made, but I like to end every episode on a high note. So what's something that's happened lately in your business that you're proud of?
I'm so proud of, the culture manifesto that we shipped. This is something that really came from a lot of hard work over the years to really define the culture pillars that matter here. And I'm going to share what those pillars are and then tell, kind of the stories where they show up. The 3 pillars that matter here at Zingage are: number 1, customer first, understanding that the people who we build for, everything that we do here is at the end of the day in service of those providers, in service of their caregivers and their clients. And that's why we wake up every morning excited and thrilled to do everything we do. And where that shows up is that, we look at the kind of decisions we make, the way that we build our products, the way that we approach every decision. It's asking the question of, is this going to put a customer first, or is it going to put ourselves, whether it be profits or whether it be any sort of, kind of other motivations first? We never think in terms of our own ability. We had a saying in my high school is non-sibby, not for oneself. And that's what we care about here at Zingage. And the story you gave about that New Jersey provider, that's exactly it. If half our staff quit tomorrow, who's going to come in and save the day? There isn't really a company like that. I'm so proud that we can do that for these providers and that we've done it multiple times. The next one is velocity. And velocity is super important to us because healthcare does not stop. People are not slowing down the rate of illness. They're not slowing down the rate of aging. These emergencies are happening every single minute. Right now, across the country, there are call-outs happening that are sending people to the hospital or worse. And so we have to move quickly. But I use the word velocity in particular because it's not just about speed, it's about direction. You have to slow down when you turn those corners and really make sure that you're going in the right direction. Because if you're just moving fast to a dead end or to something worse, it would have been better to have not moved at all. And lastly, what I'll say is the extreme ownership element of this. There's so much in the way of blame culture across the board. And I really love the providers we work with in this space because of that culture. The buck stops here. If you don't get the care you need, it's our fault. If we're not doing right by you, that's on us. And that's the kind of culture that we see from our customers. And that's the kind of culture that we build with, is that we're here to solve a problem and with high integrity, answer honestly when we can't solve a problem, how we're going to address it if we can or will, and then move forward with providers who have that same level of integrity, because that's the kind of partnership and relationship we want from this ecosystem ultimately.
Okay, before we get out of here, what do you want to plug?
I want to plug Operator. Obviously, this is new flagship product. This product is the back office AI platform that completely changes how care coordination is done. We are solving problems related to scheduling, care coordination, and compliance so that home care owners, home care schedulers, and care coordinators can continue to grow their business so they can sleep at night, so they can enjoy their weekends and get their lives back. We're doing this today with dozens of home care providers who are servicing hundreds of thousands of patients annually. We're here to really solve a fundamental problem, which is that when people need care, we don't want any sort of delay in addressing those needs. And when I say people who need care, it's not just the clients who are experiencing a call out, but it's the caregivers who are experiencing emergencies, those folks who are locked out in a strange neighborhood, those folks who are allergic to cats but got placed in a cat home, even the caregivers who are, calling out because they're locked in their trunk. Or if it's the scared daughter who's 400 miles away from her dementia mother because someone isn't there on time. These are the kind of folks who we're working with and servicing on behalf of our customers today so that they can think bigger and add new clients, add new caregivers, grow their business, and make home care the wonderful promise that it's meant to be.
Well, Victor, thanks for finally coming on my podcast. It only took like a year and some change to get you on here. Let's do it again before the next year ends.
Will do. Thanks,
All right,
David.
Thanks. On behalf of the team here at Zingage, thanks for listening to the show. We'll be back next week with another episode, so be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. Leave us a rating while you're there. It helps other people find the show. If you have comments on the show, drop me a line, david@zingage.com. Would love to hear from you, chat with you there.